I am Rosina, 32 years old, a marketing executive living in Seattle. I had been married to Ethan for 8 years when I discovered his affair by accident through a text message. What happened at the company party that night changed multiple lives forever. I had trusted our marriage completely until that moment. Before I begin my story, I would love if you could like and subscribe and let me know in the comments where you are watching from. I met Ethan during my junior year of college. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon and I had ducked into the campus coffee shop to escape the downpour. The place was packed with students, but there was one empty chair at a table where a guy with messy dark hair and intense blue eyes was working on his laptop. I asked if I could sit there and he looked up with the most genuine smile I had ever seen. "Only if you tell me your name," he said. "Rosina," I replied, and that was the beginning of everything. We talked for 3 hours that day, forgetting about classes and assignments. Ethan was studying software engineering while I was pursuing marketing. We shared the same dry sense of humor, the same love for old bookstores, and the same dream of moving to the Pacific Northwest after graduation. By the time the rain stopped, I knew something special had started. Our early relationship was filled with those magical moments that make you believe in fate. Late-night study sessions that turned into deep conversations about our childhoods, our hopes, our fears. Ethan would leave little notes in my textbooks for me to find during class. I would surprise him with coffee during his marathon coding sessions. We had inside jokes that made no sense to anyone else, and we could communicate volumes with just a glance. When finals week stressed me to tears, Ethan created a silly survival kit with my favourite snacks and a playlist of songs that made me laugh. When Ethan doubted his abilities after a failed project, I reminded him of all the reasons he would succeed. We balanced each other perfectly, his logical thinking complementing my creative approach to problems. After graduation, we both received job offers in Seattle. Moving across the country together felt like an adventure. We packed everything we owned into his old Honda and drove for 5 days, staying in quirky motels and making detours to see roadside attractions. Every mile brought us closer to the future we had planned. Our wedding was everything I had dreamed of as a little girl. We held it in my hometown of Louisville with cherry blossoms in full bloom. My dad cried when he walked me down the aisle, and Ethan looked at me as if I was the only person in the world. Our vows were heartfelt promises that I believed would last forever. "I choose you, Rosina," Ethan said, his voice steady and sure. "Today and every day after, I choose your happiness alongside my own. I choose to grow with you, learn with you, build a life with you that neither of us could create alone." I meant every word of my response. I promise to be your partner and equal in all things, to support your dreams as fiercely as my own, to choose us even when it is difficult, especially when it is difficult. Our first apartment in Seattle was tiny but perfect. The windows looked out over the city skyline, and we spent countless evenings on our small balcony planning our future while watching the sunset. On weekends, we explored our new home, hiking through the lush forests around Mount Rainier, taking ferry rides to nearby islands, discovering hidden restaurants in different neighborhoods. We were young in love and certain that our life together would only get better. And for many years it did. Ethan joined a promising tech startup and quickly became an essential part of their team. I worked my way up at a marketing firm, eventually becoming an executive managing major accounts. We celebrated each promotion, each raise, each small victory together. Our success felt shared, each achievement belonging to both of us. After 5 years in Seattle, we had saved enough to buy a house in a beautiful neighborhood north of the city. It had a yard for the garden. I wanted to plant an extra bedroom that could one day become a nursery and a home office, where Ethan could work when he needed to. The day we got our keys, we danced in the empty living room, amazed that this place was really ours. Our daily routines were comfortable and familiar. Ethan would make coffee in the mornings while I prepared breakfast. We would kiss goodbye at the door text throughout the day and reconnect over dinner. On Friday nights, we would try a new restaurant. Saturdays were for housework and errands. Sundays were sacred, reserved for lazy mornings in bed and afternoon walks around the neighborhood. We talked about having children, agreeing to wait until we felt more established in our careers. We planned trips we wanted to take, places we wanted to see together. We discussed retirement as if it were a given, that we would spend our golden years side by side. The future stretched out before us, full of possibilities, and I never questioned that we would experience all of it together. It was around our 7th anniversary when things began to change in ways I could not quite name. The shifts were subtle at first, so slight that I doubted my own perceptions. Ethan started working later, claiming big projects and important deadlines. Our text conversations throughout the day became less frequent. He was more protective of his phone, taking it with him, even for short trips to the bathroom or kitchen. When I mentioned these changes, he had reasonable explanations for everything. His company was preparing for a new product launch. His boss was demanding more of everyone. He was trying to position himself for a promotion. It all made perfect sense, and yet something felt off in a way I could not articulate. "You are overthinking things," I told myself. "This is just a busy season. It will pass." I made excuses for the growing distance between us, blaming work stress, the natural evolution of a long-term relationship, my own insecurities. I reminded myself that all marriages have phases, that passion naturally wanes and transforms over time. I believed that what we had built was stronger than these temporary changes. I was wrong. It was our 8th anniversary, and Ethan had made reservations at an upscale restaurant downtown. I spent hours getting ready, choosing a dark green dress that he had once said brought out the gold flecks in my eyes, styling my hair in loose waves the way he preferred. I was determined to reconnect to bridge whatever gap had formed between us. The restaurant was perfect, with dim lighting and a view of the water. Ethan looked handsome in his grey suit, and for the first part of the evening it felt like old times. We reminisced about our wedding day, laughed about the disaster that was our first Thanksgiving together when we had accidentally locked ourselves out while the turkey was in the oven. Then his phone rang. Ethan glanced at the screen and something in his expression changed. "I need to take this," he said, already standing. "Work emergency." He stepped outside, leaving me alone at the table. Through the window, I could see him pacing on the sidewalk, gesturing animatedly as he spoke. When he returned 15 minutes later, his energy had shifted. He was distracted, checking his phone under the table, only half listening to what I was saying. When the bill came, I noticed a receipt in his wallet as he pulled out his credit card. It was from Luciana's, an Italian restaurant on the other side of the city that we had never visited together. The date on the receipt was from the previous week, when Ethan had told me he was working late and had grabbed a sandwich at his desk. "Have you been to Luciana's recently?" I asked casually, gesturing toward the receipt. Ethan's hesitation was brief but noticeable. "Oh, that was a lunch meeting with clients last week. The sales team wanted to impress them. It was a plausible explanation. Many business deals happened over expensive lunches. But something in the way his eyes did not quite meet mine made my stomach twist. Over the next few weeks, I noticed other inconsistencies. A new cologne that I had not bought him. Unexplained charges on our credit card statement. Evenings when he claimed to be working, but his coworker mentioned in passing that Ethan had left the office at the normal time. Each discrepancy was small enough to explain away, yet together they formed a pattern that was increasingly difficult to ignore. I confided in my best friend Alicia during our monthly girls' night out. We sat in her kitchen drinking wine while her kids slept upstairs. Her husband Brian was working night shifts that month, giving us the perfect opportunity to talk freely. "Am I being paranoid?" I asked after sharing my concerns. "Is this just what happens when you have been married for a while?" Alicia refilled my glass, her expression thoughtful. "I cannot tell you what is happening, but I can tell you that your feelings are valid. If something feels wrong, it is worth paying attention to. Just do not jump to conclusions without evidence. I do not want to be the wife who snoops through her husband's phone, I said. I would hate myself for that. Then do not snoop, Alicia advised, but keep your eyes open. The truth has a way of revealing itself when it is ready. I wanted to believe the best about Ethan, about us. I wanted to trust that the foundation we had built was solid enough to withstand whatever was happening. But doubt once planted is difficult to uproot. The moment that changed everything came unexpectedly on a Tuesday afternoon. My laptop had crashed while I was preparing an important presentation for a client meeting. With my deadline looming and my files inaccessible, I remembered that Ethan had left his laptop at home that day, choosing to use his work computer at the office. I opened his laptop, planning to email myself the files I needed and continue working. As I logged in, a notification appeared in the corner of the screen. A text message from someone named Amanda Parker. The preview showed just enough to turn my world upside down. Cannot wait to see you again. Last night was amazing. I recognized the name. Amanda Parker worked in Ethan's department. I had met her briefly at a previous company event, a tall woman with sleek blonde hair and confident demeanor. She had been polite but distant, barely acknowledging me beyond a cursory greeting. The room seemed to spin around me. My heart pounded in my ears. I felt physically ill, rushing to the bathroom where I was violently sick. When I returned to the laptop, I stared at the notification, willing it to transform into something innocent, something explainable. It did not change. Those 10 words remained evidence of a reality I had not wanted to see. My first instinct was to call Ethan, to demand answers, to scream and cry and break things. But some deeper part of me, some voice of clarity amid the chaos of my emotions, urged caution. If I confronted him now with nothing but a single text message as evidence, he would have too much room to manipulate the truth. I needed to know exactly what I was facing before I faced it. I closed the laptop and called in sick to work. Then I sat on our bed, the bed we had shared for 8 years, and allowed myself 1 hour to fall apart completely. I sobbed until my throat was raw and my eyes were swollen. I punched pillows and cursed Ethan's name. I let the pain and shock wash over me in waves. Then I got up, washed my face, and began to plan. My investigation started with our phone records. As the account holder, I had access to the detailed billing information. What I found confirmed my worst fears. For the past 6 months, Ethan had been making regular calls to the same number, often during his lunch hour or late in the evening when he claimed to be working. The calls ranged from brief check-ins to conversations lasting over an hour. I did not have Amanda's personal number to confirm it was hers, but the timing of the calls aligned perfectly with Ethan's unexplained absences and late nights. The pattern was unmistakable, with clusters of calls before nights, when Ethan did not come home until after I was asleep. Next, I checked our shared tablet, which was synced to Ethan's phone. He had apparently forgotten this connection, as I found message notifications from Amanda that he had deleted from his phone, but that still appeared in the tablet's notification history. The messages were vague enough to seem innocent if read individually, but together they told a story of secret meetings and shared intimacy. Can we meet at our usual place today? Last night was perfect. I cannot stop thinking about you. I miss your touch already. With trembling hands, I took screenshots of everything, saving the evidence to a secure folder. Each discovery was like a knife to my heart, but I forced myself to continue to learn the full extent of the betrayal. I searched Amanda Parker online, finding her professional profile and social media accounts. According to her LinkedIn page, she had joined Ethan's company 2 years ago as a product manager. Her Instagram showed a woman who carefully curated her image, posting professional headshots, photos of gourmet meals, and scenic vacation spots. There were also pictures of her with a tall, handsome man identified as her husband, Jackson. They posed in front of their modernist home on skiing trips at charity galas. They looked perfect together, their smiles bright, their lives enviable. Jackson Parker was tagged in many of the photos. His own profile identified him as an architect with a prestigious firm in Seattle. They had been married for 5 years and had no children. They seemed from the outside to be living an ideal life, just as Ethan and I had appeared to anyone looking in. I wondered if Jackson knew. I wondered if he too sensed that something was wrong but could not quite identify the source. I wondered if he made excuses for her absences, believed her lies, trusted her completely, as I had trusted Ethan. During this time, I maintained a facade of normalcy when Ethan was home. I prepared meals, asked about his day, watched our favourite shows beside him on the couch. Each ordinary moment was now tainted with knowledge he did not realise I possessed. It was the most difficult performance of my life, smiling through dinner while my stomach churned, laughing at his jokes, while silently cataloguing his deceptions. The strain took its toll. I lost weight, my clothes hanging loose on my frame. I developed insomnia, lying awake long after Ethan fell asleep, studying his peaceful face and wondering how he could rest so easily while living a double life. I had anxiety attacks that left me gasping for breath in bathroom stalls, at work in the grocery store parking lot, in the shower, where the sound of water masked my sobs. One evening was particularly painful. Ethan called to say he would be working late, a familiar excuse by now. I sat alone at our dining table, the meal I had prepared growing cold, and decided to verify his story. I drove to his office building and parked across the street. At 9:30, I watched him exit the building and check his phone, smiling at whatever message he had received. Instead of heading toward the parking garage, where his car would be, he walked 2 blocks and entered an upscale hotel. I waited in my car for 20 minutes, before gathering the courage to follow. In the hotel lobby, I spotted him immediately sitting at the bar with Amanda. They were not touching, maintaining a professional distance in public, but the way they leaned toward each other, the intimacy of their expressions, told me everything I needed to know. I took photos with my phone, my hands shaking so badly that I had to brace against a column. As I was about to leave, Amanda stood up, gathering her purse. Ethan remained seated, presumably to wait a few minutes before following her upstairs. I hurried out before either could spot me, nearly colliding with a group entering the hotel. Back in my car, I broke down completely. It was one thing to suspect to find digital evidence, but seeing them together made it undeniably real. I could no longer pretend that there might be an innocent explanation, that I might be misinterpreting the signs. My husband was having an affair, and he had been lying to my face for months. The next day, I called a therapist, whose name Alicia had given me months ago, when I first mentioned the changes in my marriage. Dr. Marlene Carter listened as I poured out the whole story, my voice breaking frequently as I detailed my discoveries. "What do you want to do with this information?" she asked, when I had finished. "I do not know," I admitted. Part of me wants to scream at him to make him hurt as much as I am hurting. Another part just wants to curl up and disappear. "Those are both understandable reactions," Dr. Carter said. "But before you decide on any course of action, I would like you to consider what outcome would be best for your long-term well-being, not just what would feel satisfying in the moment." I left her office with a recommendation to take a few days to process my emotions before confronting Ethan. Dr. Carter suggested writing down what I wanted to say, what questions I needed answered, what boundaries I needed to establish. She cautioned against making permanent decisions while in the midst of acute emotional trauma. "Whatever you decide, make sure it is a choice you can live with," she advised. I spent the next week considering my options. I could confront Ethan privately, giving him the opportunity to confess and explain himself away from public scrutiny. I could file for divorce immediately, serving him with papers without warning. I could expose the affair to our friends and family, ensuring that he could not control the narrative. None of these options felt right. A private confrontation would allow him too much control over the conversation. Immediate divorce proceedings felt too impersonal for the end of an 8-year marriage, and involving our social circle seemed unnecessarily messy. Then I remembered Amanda's husband, Jackson. He deserved to know the truth as much as I did, and Amanda deserved to face consequences for her actions just as Ethan did. The more I thought about it, the clearer my path became. I would confront them both together, and Jackson would be there to witness it all. The annual company party was scheduled for the following month. It was a formal affair held at a downtown hotel ballroom where employees and their spouses gathered to celebrate the year's achievements. I had attended these events with Ethan every year since he joined the company. I confirmed my plan when Ethan mentioned casually over dinner that this year's party would be bigger than usual as the company had exceeded its revenue targets. Amanda is heading the planning committee, he added, his voice carefully neutral. She says they have gone all out this time. Is her husband coming? I asked, maintaining an expression of mild interest. What does he do again? I cannot remember. Jackson. Yeah, he will be there. He is an architect, pretty successful one from what I hear. I nodded and changed the subject, but internally I was cementing my strategy. The party would provide the perfect setting. All the key players would be present. The public nature of the event would prevent an extreme reaction, and if I was going to have my heart broken in front of others, at least I could ensure that I was not the only one. In the weeks leading up to the party, I prepared meticulously. I went shopping for a dress that would make me feel powerful, settling on a deep burgundy gown that contrasted dramatically with my fair skin and dark hair. I scheduled appointments for hair makeup and a manicure. I wanted to look my absolute best when I took control of the situation. More importantly, I organised my evidence. I printed screenshots of text messages, phone records, hotel receipts. I saved photos to my phone, ready to be displayed if necessary. I rehearsed what I would say, practicing in front of the mirror, until I could deliver my lines without my voice shaking. I also met with Alicia several times, refining my approach with her input. She volunteered to attend the party as my support person. Her husband Brian worked for a company that occasionally collaborated with Ethan's firm, providing a plausible reason for their presence. Are you sure you want to do it this way? Alicia asked during our final planning session. It is not too late to consider a different approach. I am sure, I said firmly. They made their choices, knowing the potential consequences. Now they have to face them. The day of the party arrived. I spent hours getting ready, taking care with every detail of my appearance. When I emerged from our bedroom fully dressed, Ethan looked up from his phone, and his eyes widened appreciatively. Wow, he said, you look stunning. Thank you, I replied, accepting his compliment with a smile that did not quite reach my eyes. Shall we go? The venue was as elegant as promised, with crystal chandeliers and elaborate floral arrangements. A string quartet played softly in one corner, while servers circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres. Ethan greeted colleagues as we entered, his hand resting lightly on the small of my back, in a gesture that once would have felt comforting, but now seemed like just another performance. I scanned the room looking for Amanda. I spotted her across the ballroom wearing a silver dress that caught the light as she moved. She was laughing with a group of co-workers, one hand gesturing animatedly as she spoke. Even from a distance, I could see why Ethan had been attracted to her. She exuded confidence and vitality, drawing attention without seeming to try. Beside her stood a tall man with dark hair and a well-cut suit. Jackson Parker looked exactly like his photos. Handsome in a classical way, with strong features and an athletic build. He smiled indulgently at his wife, clearly proud to be with her. My heart ached for him, for the humiliation he was about to experience, but he deserved the truth, just as I had deserved it months ago. Ethan led me toward Amanda's group, seemingly oblivious to the significance of the introduction he was about to make. Rosina, you remember Amanda from the department, right? And this is her husband, Jackson. Amanda turned, and for a split second I saw something flicker across her face when she recognized me. It was quickly replaced by a practiced smile, but that momentary reaction told me everything. She knew exactly who I was, and she felt secure enough in her position to stand there beside my husband, making small talk with me, as if she had not been sleeping with him for months. "Rosina, so nice to see you again," she said, her tone slightly condescending. "Ethan talks about you all the time at work." I smiled back, equally false. "Does he? How nice. And Jackson, it is a pleasure to finally meet you. I have heard so much about you." We chatted for a few minutes, exchanging pleasantries that meant nothing. Amanda made a point of touching Ethan's arm when she laughed at something he said, a gesture that might seem innocent to anyone else, but that I recognized as a subtle claim of ownership. She was marking her territory, confident that I was too blind or too stupid to notice. Jackson seemed genuinely nice, asking about my work and commenting on how long Ethan and I had been married. 8 years, wow. Amanda and I are coming up on 6. Any advice for making it last? He asked with a warmth that made my chest tight. Before I could respond, a colleague called Ethan away to meet a potential client. He excused himself, promising to return shortly. As he walked away, I saw him exchange a brief glance with Amanda, a private communication that excluded both me and Jackson. "I need another drink," Amanda announced. "Jackson, would you mind?" "Not at all." "Rosina, can I get you anything?" he offered. "I am fine, thank you," I replied, watching as he made his way to the bar. And then it was just the two of us. Amanda's friendly demeanor shifted slightly, her smile becoming more smug now that we were alone. She looked me up and down in a way that made it clear she was evaluating me as competition and finding me lacking. "This is quite a party," I said conversationally. "You must have put a lot of work into planning it." "It was nothing," she replied with false modesty, though the hours were long. Lots of late nights at the office. The deliberate emphasis she placed on late nights made my blood boil, but I maintained my composure. This was my moment, and I would not waste it by losing control too early. "Late nights can be so productive, cannot they?" I said, my tone innocent. "Especially at the Westbrook Hotel. I hear their room service is excellent." The colour drained from Amanda's face. "I do not know what you are talking about." "No, that is strange because I have photos of you entering the hotel with my husband on multiple occasions, among other evidence." She grabbed my arm, her fingers digging into my skin. "Keep your voice down," she hissed. "You do not know what you are talking about." I removed her hand firmly. "I know exactly what I am talking about. 6 months of text messages, phone calls, hotel receipts. Shall I continue?" Her eyes darted around the room looking for Ethan for escape. "This is not the place to discuss this." "On the contrary," I said calmly, "this is the perfect place. Oh, look, here comes your husband with your drink." Panic flashed across her face. "Rosina, please, we can talk about this privately. There is no need to make a scene." "You should have thought about that before you started sleeping with my husband," I replied, turning to greet Jackson as he approached. "Here you go, honey," he said, handing Amanda a glass of white wine. He turned to me with a friendly smile. "So, Rosina, how did you and Ethan meet college sweethearts?" I confirmed. "You know, Jackson, I was just telling Amanda that I feel like I already know you." "Really? How is that?" he asked, clearly pleased. "Well, for the past 6 months I have been gathering quite a bit of information about both of you," I said, keeping my voice steady. "About your marriage, your home, your work, although I have to say, I suspect there are some details about Amanda that might surprise you as much as they surprised me." Confusion crossed his face, followed by the first hint of concern. Amanda stood rigidly beside him, her untouched wine trembling slightly in her hand. "What exactly are you saying?" Jackson asked, his friendly tone now cautious. "I am saying that your wife has been having an affair with my husband since March," I stated clearly. "I have proof of their meetings, their communications, their lies to both of us." The silence that followed was absolute. Around us, conversations continued, glasses clinked, music played, but in our small circle, time seemed to stop. Jackson stared at me, then at Amanda, incomprehension slowly giving way to dawning realization. "That is ridiculous," Amanda finally sputtered. "Jackson, she is clearly disturbed. I barely know her husband." I pulled out my phone and opened the gallery of evidence I had compiled. "Would you like to see the photos I took of you entering the Westbrook Hotel together last month? Or perhaps the text messages where you call him my love and discuss how to keep your meetings secret? I have quite a collection." Jackson took the phone from my hand, his movements mechanical. I watched as he scrolled through the images, each one confirming the truth of my words. His expression hardened with each swipe of his finger, the muscle in his jaw tightening. "Jackson, it is not what it looks like," Amanda pleaded, abandoning her denial now that the evidence was literally in his hands. "It was a mistake. It did not mean anything." More people were beginning to notice our tense grouping. Conversations nearby quieted as colleagues sensed the brewing confrontation. From the corner of my eye, I saw Ethan returning, stopping short when he registered the tableau before him. 6 months of deception does not happen by mistake," I said loud enough for those nearby to hear. "Lying to your spouse night after night is a choice. Breaking vows is a choice." Ethan pushed through the onlookers' panic, evident in his expression. "Rosina, what is going on?" Jackson turned to him, my phone still clutched in his hand. "You tell me," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Why do I have photos of you entering a hotel with my wife?" The room had gone completely silent now. Dozens of eyes watched the drama unfold, colleagues frozen with champagne glasses, halfway to their lips, conversations abandoned mid-sentence. "This is a misunderstanding," Ethan attempted, but his voice lacked conviction. "No," I corrected. "A misunderstanding is when you buy the wrong brand of coffee. This is a deliberate betrayal by 2 people who claim to love us." Amanda was crying now, mascara tracking down her cheeks. "Jackson, please, can we talk about this privately? I can explain." "Explain what?" Jackson demanded, his controlled facade cracking. "How you have been lying to my face for half a year, how you made a fool of me in front of all your co-workers. What exactly is there to explain?" Ethan tried a different approach, stepping toward me with his hands outstretched. "Rosina, honey, this is not the place. Let us go home and talk about this." "Do not call me honey," I replied, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside me. "And there is nothing to talk about. I gave you 8 years of my life, Ethan. I trusted you completely, and this is how you repaid that trust." The weight of public scrutiny seemed to finally register with Ethan. He glanced around at the ring of spectators, at his boss, watching with narrowed eyes at colleagues whose respect he had worked for years to earn. The realization that his professional reputation was imploding alongside his marriage showed clearly on his face. "Please," he whispered, "not like this." "You did not give me a choice in how my marriage ended," I replied. "Why should I give you one?" Jackson handed my phone back to me, his expression grim. "Thank you for telling me the truth," he said formally, as if we were concluding a business meeting other than witnessing the implosion of our marriages. "I appreciate your courage." He turned to Amanda, whose tears had given way to a kind of numb shock. "Do not bother coming home tonight," he told her, "or any night. We are done." With that, he walked away, moving through the stunned crowd with the dignity of someone who refuses to be a spectacle in his own tragedy. Amanda watched him go, seemingly paralyzed by the public collapse of her carefully constructed life. I felt a hand on my shoulder and turned to find Alicia beside me, having made her way through the onlookers. "Ready to go?" she asked quietly. I nodded, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had carried me through the confrontation was ebbing, leaving behind a bone-deep weariness. I had accomplished what I came to do. The truth was out. The consequences would follow. As Alicia led me toward the exit, Ethan called after me. "Rosina, wait. You cannot just leave like this." I turned back one last time, meeting his desperate gaze with a calm I did not truly feel. I am not the one who left Ethan. You left months ago. You just did not have the decency to tell me. With that final truth spoken, I walked away from the ruins of my marriage, head high, surrounded by the shocked whispers of strangers who had just witnessed the most painful moment of my life. But beneath the pain, I felt something unexpected stirring, the first small spark of freedom. The drive home was silent. Ethan had followed us in his car, presumably after making awkward apologies to his colleagues. I sat in Alicia's passenger seat, staring out the window at the city lights blurring through my tears. She did not push me to talk, understanding that I needed space to process what had just happened. When we arrived at my house, Ethan was already waiting in the driveway. Alicia squeezed my hand. "Do you want me to stay? Brian can watch the kids a little longer." "No," I said. "This is something I need to do alone. Thank you for being there tonight." "Call me any time," she insisted, "day or night." Ethan followed me into the house, launching into explanations before the door had even closed behind us. "Rosina, it was a mistake, a stupid, meaningless thing that got out of hand. It did not mean anything." "If it meant nothing, why did it continue for 6 months?" I asked, removing my earrings and placing them carefully on the entryway table. "Why did you lie to me day after day?" "I did not want to hurt you," he said, running his hands through his hair in frustration. "It was selfish, I know that. I got caught up in something that made me feel, I do not know, important, desired, but it was never about not loving you." "Do not insult me by claiming your affair was an expression of love," I replied, my voice tight with anger. "You betrayed every promise you ever made to me. You shared our private struggles with another woman. You risked my health by being intimate with someone else. You made me question my own perceptions when I sensed something was wrong. That is not love, Ethan. That is selfishness and cowardice." He followed me up the stairs, continuing his desperate justifications. Amanda had pursued him. The relationship had been more emotional than physical. He had been planning to end it. He had been under enormous pressure at work. Each excuse rang more hollow than the last. "I never stopped loving you," he insisted as I entered our bedroom. "This does not have to be the end of us. We can get counselling. We can work through this. People recover from affairs all the time." I turned to face him, suddenly exhausted by his attempts to minimize what he had done. "Ethan, stop. Just stop. I do not care about your excuses or your rationalizations. The simple fact is that I trusted you and you betrayed that trust in the most fundamental way possible. One mistake should not erase 8 years together," he pleaded. "It was not one mistake. It was hundreds of individual choices to lie, to cheat, to disrespect me and our marriage. Every time you texted her, every time you met her, every time you came home and acted like everything was normal, you were choosing her over me, over us. We argued in circles for hours, covering the same ground repeatedly without resolution. Eventually, Ethan moved to embrace me, seeking physical connection when words had failed. I stepped back, holding up my hands. "No, you do not get to touch me. Not tonight, not ever again. I want you to sleep in the guest room. Tomorrow you can find somewhere else to stay." He looked as though I had slapped him. "You are throwing me out of my own home." "Our home," I corrected, "the home I kept clean and welcoming while you were meeting your girlfriend in hotel rooms. And yes, I am asking you to leave until we can figure out next steps legally." Ethan slept in the guest room that night, though I doubt either of us got much rest. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the events of the evening, alternating between vindication at having exposed the truth and grief for the future I had lost. The next morning, Ethan packed a suitcase while I sat at the kitchen table, mechanically sipping coffee. The ordinary domestic scene felt surreal after the drama of the night before. He paused at the door, suitcase in hand. "I am going to a hotel for now," he said. "But this is not over, Rosina. We have too much history to throw away. I made a terrible mistake, and I will spend the rest of my life making it up to you if you will let me. I looked up at him, this man I had loved for a decade now, a stranger to me. Goodbye, Ethan. After he left the house, felt both emptier and somehow lighter, as if a weight had been lifted. I called in sick to work, unprepared to face questions or sympathetic looks. Then I sat on my couch and allowed myself to truly feel everything I had been suppressing: rage, humiliation, grief, fear. The emotions crashed over me in waves, each one threatening to pull me under. In the following days, word spread quickly through our social circle. Some friends called immediately, offering support and expressing outrage on my behalf. Others were conspicuously silent, perhaps unsure which side to take or uncomfortable with the messiness of infidelity. A few, to my surprise, suggested that I should have handled the situation more discreetly, as if the problem was not the affair, but my response to it. Ethan's parents called his mother tearfully, begging me to reconsider, insisting that marriage was about forgiveness and second chances. My own parents were solidly in my corner, my father offering to fly out from Kentucky to have a word with Ethan, a suggestion I gently declined. The division of our possessions began as a painful exercise in untangling two intertwined lives. Each shared item held memories, making even simple decisions emotionally fraught. Ethan wanted the coffee table we had found at an antique market in Portland. I wanted the framed map of places we had travelled together. Some things were easy to divide, others seemed impossible to separate fairly. I met with a divorce attorney, a woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. She explained my options, the likely timeline, the financial implications. Washington was a no-fault state, she informed me, which meant that Ethan's infidelity would not impact the legal proceedings or settlement. This seemed profoundly unjust, but I understood it was the reality I had to accept. Throughout this period, Ethan made constant efforts at reconciliation. He sent flowers with apologetic notes. He emailed long letters explaining his actions and expressing remorse. He asked mutual friends to speak to me on his behalf. His persistence was exhausting, each contact reopening wounds that had barely begun to heal. Amanda too reached out, though her message was far from apologetic. She sent a scathing email accusing me of deliberately destroying her marriage and career out of jealousy. According to her version of events, her relationship with Ethan had been a love story, thwarted by my vindictive actions. I deleted the email without responding, recognizing it as the desperate attempt of someone unwilling to take responsibility for her choices. About 2 weeks after the party, I received an unexpected message from Jackson Parker asking if I would be willing to meet him for coffee. Curiosity overcame my initial hesitation, and I agreed, suggesting a cafe in a neighborhood far from either of our homes. He was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee. He stood when he saw me, extending his hand formally. "Thank you for coming. I was not sure you would want to." "I was not sure either," I admitted, taking the seat opposite him. "How are you doing?" The question seemed inadequate given the circumstances, but Jackson answered thoughtfully. "Some days are better than others. The nights are the worst. I keep replaying everything, wondering how I missed the signs." "I know exactly what you mean," I said. "I have done the same thing, re-examined every conversation, every late night, every strange comment." We talked for nearly 2 hours, comparing notes on our experiences. Jackson had filed for divorce immediately, having discovered that Amanda's affair with Ethan was not her first infidelity. She had cheated early in their marriage with a former colleague, and Jackson had forgiven her after months of couples therapy. This second betrayal left no room for reconciliation. "The worst part is that I gave her a second chance," he said bitterly. "I believed her when she swore it would never happen again. I trusted her completely, even when friends warned me I was being naive." "You should not blame yourself for choosing to trust," I told him. "That is not a character flaw. The people who betray trust are the ones with the problem, not those who give it." Jackson nodded, seeming to find comfort in this perspective. What about you and Ethan? Is there any chance you will work things out? I shook my head. No. Even if I could somehow forgive the affair, I could never forget the months of lies. Every time he looked me in the eye and said he was working late, every time he texted me that he loved me right after being with her, every time he let me doubt my own instincts when I sensed something was wrong, the affair was a betrayal, but the deception was abuse. I understand, Jackson said quietly, and I want to thank you for telling me the truth that night. It was humiliating in the moment, but you spared me years of continued deception. Not many people would have had the courage to do that. His gratitude was unexpected and touched something deep within me. In the aftermath of the confrontation, I had occasionally questioned my approach, wondering if public exposure had been unnecessarily cruel. Jackson's perspective reminded me that truth, even painful truth, was ultimately a form of respect. We parted with an awkward hug, two strangers bound by a unique shared experience. I never saw Jackson again after that day, though I later heard through mutual connections that he had moved to Chicago for a fresh start. I hoped he found happiness there, free from the shadow of betrayal. The weeks that followed were challenging in different ways. Returning to work meant facing colleagues who had heard about my marital drama through the grapevine. Some were awkwardly sympathetic, others uncomfortably curious. The constant need to manage others' reactions to my personal crisis was exhausting. After a particularly difficult day of fielding intrusive questions, I decided to take a leave of absence. My boss was understanding, having gone through his own divorce years earlier. Take the time you need, he advised. The work will be here when you are ready to return. This period of time off became an unexpected gift. Without the daily demands of my job, I could focus entirely on healing and rebuilding. I sought out a support group for people going through divorce, finding solace in the shared experiences of others who understood the specific pain of marital betrayal. The divorce proceedings moved forward methodically. Ethan and I communicated primarily through our attorneys, a formality that provided necessary emotional distance. He made one final plea for reconciliation when we met to sign preliminary papers, his eyes red-rimmed, and his voice breaking as he asked for another chance. I understand now why you cannot forgive me, he said, but I need you to know that loving you was the most real thing in my life. Everything else, including the affair, was just me running from my own inadequacies. I will regret losing you until the day I die. His words stirred something in me, a flicker of the love I had once felt for him, but it was too little too late. The marriage had been broken beyond repair. Not in the moment I discovered the affair, but in all the moments Ethan had chosen deception over honesty, betrayal over loyalty, his desires over our vows. I hope you find peace, Ethan, I said sincerely, and I hope you become the kind of man who deserves the love you are given. It was the last real conversation we ever had. Through mutual friends, I later learned that Amanda and Jackson's divorce had been finalized as well. Somewhat surprisingly, Amanda and Ethan did not continue their relationship after their marriages ended. Perhaps the affair had only been exciting while it was forbidden, or perhaps the public exposure had tainted whatever connection they thought they had. Either way, they had destroyed 2 marriages for a relationship that ultimately meant nothing. The final divorce papers arrived on a Tuesday morning, almost exactly 6 months after the company party. I signed my name on the indicated lines, officially ending my marriage to Ethan James Turner. I expected to feel something momentous, some sense of finality or loss or even relief. Instead, I felt only a quiet acceptance. One chapter of my life was ending, another was about to begin. The first months of being legally single again were a strange mixture of liberation and loneliness. I had moved into a 1-bedroom apartment in a different neighborhood, wanting a fresh start away from the memories our house contained. The space was entirely mine, decorated according to my tastes alone, a physical representation of my new independence. At first, I struggled with the silence. After years of sharing space with another person, the absence of footsteps, breathing the small sounds of someone else moving through the same rooms was deafening. I found myself leaving the television on just for background noise, calling friends, more often than usual, spending time in coffee shops where the murmur of conversation created a comforting ambiance. But gradually, I came to appreciate the solitude. I rediscovered parts of myself that had been compromised or set aside during my marriage. I started painting again, a hobby I had loved in college but abandoned due to lack of time and Ethan's subtle discouragement. Do you really need to set up an easel in the living room? I took a cooking class focused on cuisines I had always wanted to try, but that Ethan had no interest in. I rearranged furniture at midnight just because I could, with no one to consider but myself. Reconnecting with old friends proved both easier and more difficult than I had anticipated. Some friendships that had faded during my marriage rekindled naturally as if no time had passed. Alicia remained my steadfast support, checking in regularly and including me in family dinners, so I would not spend too many evenings alone. Other relationships were more complicated, particularly with couples who had been friends with both Ethan and me. They often seemed uncomfortable, unsure how to navigate their relationships with both of us separately. I made new friends too, joining a book club and a hiking group where I met women in similar life stages, some also rebuilding after divorce or major life changes. These new connections were refreshing, uncomplicated by shared history with Ethan or knowledge of our marital breakdown. 3 months after the divorce was finalized, I took a solo trip to New Mexico, a destination I had always wanted to visit, but that Ethan had dismissed as too hot, too dry, too full of tourist trap art galleries. I spent a week exploring Santa Fe and Taos, hiking in the mornings, visiting museums and galleries in the afternoons, eating at small local restaurants in the evenings. It was the first vacation I had taken entirely on my own terms, following only my interests and my schedule. On my final evening in Santa Fe, sitting on the hotel balcony, watching the sunset turn the distant mountains pink and gold, I realized I was happy, not constantly, not without moments of sadness or regret, but genuinely content with my life as it was. The realization brought tears to my eyes, not from sorrow, but from profound relief. I had survived the worst betrayal of my life, and I had emerged stronger, more self-aware, more authentically myself than I had been in years. When I returned to Seattle, I found a job listing that seemed perfect, a marketing director position at a smaller firm known for its innovative approaches and collaborative culture. The role would be challenging, a step up from my previous position, but I felt ready for a new professional chapter to match my personal transformation. I applied, went through 3 rounds of interviews, and was thrilled when they offered me the position. "We were impressed by your strategic thinking," the CEO told me, "but what really stood out was your resilience and adaptability. Those are qualities we value highly here." My new colleagues welcomed me warmly. The work was demanding but fulfilling, requiring creative problem-solving and close collaboration with talented people. For the first time in my career, I felt fully confident in my abilities and ideas, no longer second-guessing myself or downplaying my contributions as I sometimes had during my marriage. Of course, not every day was easy. There were still moments when grief ambushed me unexpectedly. A song on the radio that had been our song, passing the restaurant where we had celebrated our last anniversary. Finding Ethan's old college sweatshirt that had somehow made its way into my moving boxes. These moments would knock the wind out of me, leaving me gasping with the sudden sharp pain of what I had lost. Not the unfaithful husband of the end, but the loving partner of the beginning. My therapist assured me these emotional aftershocks were normal. "Grief is not linear," she reminded me. "It is okay to still feel sad sometimes about the good parts of what you lost, even while you are building a new life. I continued therapy throughout this period, finding it invaluable for processing not just the betrayal, but also the identity shift that comes with moving from wife to single woman after 8 years of marriage. I learned to examine my own contributions to patterns in the relationship, not to take blame for Ethan's choices, but to understand how I could build healthier connections in the future. About 6 months into my new job, I was grabbing coffee at a cafe near my office when I heard a familiar voice. I turned to find Ethan standing in line behind me, looking as surprised as I felt at the unexpected encounter. "Rosina!" He said my name, sounding strange in his voice after so much time. "How are you?" "I am good," I replied, surprised to find that it was true even in this uncomfortable moment. "How about you?" "Getting by," he said with a small shrug. "I transferred to the Portland office a few months ago, just in Seattle for meetings." We moved to a small table by the window, the awkwardness of former spouses who once knew every detail of each other's lives, but are now essentially strangers. Ethan looked both familiar and different, thinner perhaps, with new glasses and slightly longer hair. "I owe you an apology," he said, after we had exchanged basic updates about work and family. "A real one, not the desperate self-serving ones I gave when everything fell apart. I am truly sorry for the pain I caused you. You deserved so much better." His words seemed genuine, free from the desperate persuasion of his earlier apologies. "Thank you for saying that," I replied. "It matters even now." "I have been in therapy," he continued, "trying to understand why I made the choices I did, why I was willing to risk everything that mattered for something so meaningless." "Have you found any answers?" He looked out the window before responding. "Some. Enough to know that the problem was never you or our marriage. It was my own insecurities, my fear of being truly known, even by the person I loved most. Cheating was easier than being vulnerable." We talked for about 20 minutes, a conversation that would have been impossible in the raw aftermath of our separation. There was no attempt at reconciliation, no suggestion of remaining in each other's lives, just a quiet closure that we had both needed. As we prepared to leave, Ethan asked, "Are you happy, Rosina? That is all I really want to know." I considered the question carefully. "Yes, I am. Not every minute of every day, but fundamentally yes." "Are you?" "I am getting there," he said, slowly. We parted with an awkward hug, and I watched him walk away, struck by the realization that I felt nothing but a mild compassion for this man who had once been the center of my world. The anger, the hurt, the love, all had faded to a neutral acceptance. It was the most healing moment I had experienced since the divorce. A few weeks later, I heard through our remaining mutual connections that Amanda and Jackson had decided to try again. According to friends in their circle, they had spent months in intensive couples therapy, with Amanda demonstrating genuine remorse and commitment to rebuilding trust. I was surprised, having believed that their marriage, like mine, had been damaged beyond repair. But their story was not mine. Their choices not mine to judge. I found myself hoping they would succeed, not because I had forgiven Amanda for her role in destroying my marriage, but because I had reached a place where her life and choices no longer affected my well-being. Her success or failure had become irrelevant to my story. As my first year of post-divorce life drew to a close, I reflected on all that had changed and all that I had learned. I had discovered strengths I never knew. I possessed the courage to stand up for myself, even when it meant standing alone, the resilience to rebuild when everything familiar had been taken away. I had learned that endings, even painful ones, can be beginnings in disguise. Most importantly, I had learned that my worth was never dependent on Ethan's choices or anyone else's opinion of me. The validation I had unconsciously sought through his love had always been mine to give myself. This knowledge did not erase the pain of betrayal, but it transformed it from a defining trauma into simply one chapter in a much longer, richer story. When friends asked if I was dating again, my answer was honest. Not yet, but I am open to it when the right opportunity comes along. I was no longer afraid of being hurt, no longer convinced that Ethan's betrayal meant I was somehow unworthy of faithful love. But I was also in no rush to fill the space in my life that I had worked so hard to reclaim. The truth I now understood was both simple and profound. Trust once broken can be rebuilt, but it must start with trusting yourself, your instincts, your worth, your capacity to survive even the deepest betrayals. When you stand firmly in that self-trust, you become unbendable, unbreakable, free in a way that no one can take from you. That is the wisdom I gained from the painful end of my marriage, the gift hidden within the wreckage. And while I would never choose to experience such betrayal again, I would also never return to being the woman I was before, who defined herself by her relationship, who ignored her instincts, who placed her husband's truth above her own. That woman is gone. In her place stands someone stronger, wiser, and finally, completely herself. I had lost a husband, but found myself in the process, and that I discovered was an exchange I could live with after all. Have you ever had to rebuild your life after a betrayal? How did you find the strength to start over? Please share your experiences in the comments below, and if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that there is life and even joy after heartbreak. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, sometimes the most painful endings lead to the most beautiful beginnings.